So we are continuing along on today's shiur, spiritual growth through the lens of the mystics, and we are on page 202, at the top of page 202, and we are trying to analyze and understand the importance and the significance of the mitzvah of Shema, and what exactly does it mean, Hashem Echad, the unity of God, and specifically, what does it mean, the Gemara says that whoever extends the recitation of Shema, they extend his days and his years, particularly in the word Echad, God is one, and particularly in the letter Daled. What is all the significance of all of that? We are now beginning to understand. There's also a statement from Rabbi, who was it? Rabbi Ami, I think it was. Rabbi Meir, that said that you need, for Shema, you need kavanat halev, you need the intention of the heart. And we began to identify that one has to ponder particular things, and that seemingly is the intention of the brain, not the intention of the heart. And we did say as well that liba palig lechol shaifin, the heart extends to all of the other limbs, so we understand the importance of the heart. And we explained, just very briefly, that when a person internalizes what he studied, what he pondered, what he meditated, he has to bring it to the heart, to the extent that when a person recognizes the unity of God, it affects his whole behavior, it affects his mindset, it affects the way he behaves, the way he speaks, etc., to the extent that he is then ready and willing to give up negative characteristic traits and acquire positive characteristic traits. Now, then last week we began to discuss the concept of Shema Yisrael, the concept of what is Yisrael. What is Yisrael? What does Yisrael mean? We identified that there are two names of the Jewish people, Yaakov and Yisrael, the two qualities of both of them. Okay, we will now continue on page 202 at the top of the page. V'zehu pirush Shema Yisrael, and this is the explanation of Hid, O Israel, not here, but Hid. Hid means to say that one has to be able to totally internalize that which he's thinking and pondering. It is interesting to note, if you look at the Shema, you will find that in the Shema, the letter Ayin, the last letter of Shema, is written large. We know that the Torah, you'll find that the majority of letters are written in medium fonts, medium letters, the normal letters that we have. And sometimes, very rare, you will find large letters, and sometimes, very rare, you will find small letters, like Vayikra. In the Vayikra, the first word of the book of Vayikra, you'll find the letter Aleph very small, or Mokda, small mem. You will also find letters that are large. For example, the letter Ayin and Ehad, the letter Daled in Ehad is also written in the Torah big. So here you look at the verse, it stands out in front of you, Shema, and you see the letter Ayin, which is very big, and the letter Daled, which is very big, which spells out Ed, which means witness. That in fact, when we recite the Shema and when we ponder and when we meditate, all the things that we need to meditate upon, we in fact give testimony of the unity of God. We become His witnesses, so to speak. We give testimony, and that's very important. And this is the function of Israel, this is the function of the Jewish nation, to extend and to teach the world the unity of God. Now, what does it mean? Why do we have, this is what we began to discuss last week. Why do we need two names of God? Why does it say Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel? The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Hashem Elokenu. Hashem, just say, Hear O Israel, Hashem Echad. The Lord is God, the tetragrammaton name. Why do we need Hashem and Elokenu? Let's see. Just as a bit of an introduction, I will mention as a means of introduction. The name Havaya, the name Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, the tetragrammaton name, is a name that is associated with all energy, all power. It is a name that is associated with Or Ein Sof. It expresses the light of the divine, the infinite light of God. The name Elokim, and therefore it is a light that is, although is the impetus for the whole world, nonetheless creation cannot come about directly from that infinite light because it's too unlimited. You need to be able to have a little bit of a filter. And this is something that we will discuss a little bit later. The name Elokim is this filter, because the name Elokim refers to power and strength, which means how does godliness then relate to the material, physical, limited world? This is the function of the name Elokim, but we will get to that in a minute. That was just a little introduction. Now, on page 202. So he says over here, V'zehu pirush Shema Yisrael. This is the explanation of what does it mean, Heed, O Israel. Sheha Yisrael, that the Jew, Yishma v'yavin, will heed and will understand, v'yasig, and grasp, Ki Hashem Elokeinu, for the Lord is our God. Elokeinu means to say that God is not abstract, God is intimate with us. De Elokeinu, next line, Hainu, which means our God. What does it mean, our God? Hainu, which means Kohenu v'hayutenu hu Hashem. That our strength and our life force all comes from Hashem. In other words, the name Elokim, Elokeinu, refers to power, strength. Our strength and our power does not come from the finite and limited revelations of godliness. In fact, our source of our energy comes from even higher than that, which is Havaya, which is the Or Ein Sof, which means that there is a part of us which relates to not the light that is more related to the material world and is limited and is contracted and becomes small and finite, that can relate to the vessels of this world, to the spiritual immaturity or the spiritual smallness of this world, because after all, materialism is and physicality is the exact opposite of spirituality. It has a lot of limitations. It relates to physical things, physical pleasures, drives, and desires, etc. As far as the body is concerned, spirituality is furthest from its mind, furthest from its reality. An animal, do you think an animal thinks about anything but its grass, its food, whatever it needs to do? To a certain degree, the body has this comparison to the animal. That's why it's called the animal soul, because it's compared to the animal, that all it seeks is its bodily functions, however advanced or not so advanced by an animal or by a human being, advanced. However advanced it is, it's still finite, it's still limited, it's still material. However, but nonetheless, it still comes from God. And every human being and every intellect can perceive and understand that there is a creator. But nonetheless, having said that, even though that there is a creator, nonetheless we have to understand that our energy, our power, our potential lies not in the light that fills all worlds, what's called Memale Kol Almin, the light that fills all worlds, or it comes from the light of Sovev Kol Almin, the light that encompasses all world, and that is Or Ein Sof, the unlimited light, the infinite light. I think I may have said as an introduction that there are two types of energy. Yes, I did. There are two types of energy that fills the world, that enters the world or all worlds. That is a light which is Memale Kol Almin, V'Sovev Kol Almin, a light that is enclosed in the world. And that light that is enclosed in the world is a light that is tailor-made for the world, for the limitations of the world. That light, on the one hand, is very intimate with the vessels, with the body, with this world, etc. However, even though that is very intimately related and enclosed and enlivens the physical world, in fact brings the physicality into being, but it is a very limited light because that light is tailor-made and catered to the vessel. If, for example, if a cup contains 100 mils, only 100 mils is poured into the cup, but not 1,000,000 mils. Similarly, if a cup is very gentle and very fine, you cannot pour a molten lead into it because you just simply can't take it. You need a steel container for that. Then there is another light, and that light is Sovev Kol Almin. That is the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light. That is a light that cannot be intimately related and intimately associated with the vessels because it's infinite and the vessel is finite. But it is there and it is the source of all existence. That is the name Hashem, Yud and He and Vav and He, the tetragrammaton name. The name Elokim refers to the light of Memale Kol Almin, the light that is limited, is contracted, and relates intimately to this world. That's why we say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokenu ve'Elokei Avotenu, Elokei Abraham, Elokei Yitzhak, ve'Elokei Yaakov. You are God, blessed you are God, who is the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. You are our God, meaning to say you are intimately related to me, just as you are intimately related and associated with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In other words, every single being, every single person can relate to God on his level, can make God intimately part of his life. But that is only as far as the revelation of godliness is concerned, that is related to the physical world. And that is very limited and finite. It's great, it's grand. Through it we can perceive and understand a certain degree of godliness, that God exists, etc., His love for the world and His benevolence, etc. However, there are things higher than that. And that's the tetragrammaton, and that's the name Havaya, that's the Hashem Elokenu. In other words, not only is Elokenu our God, but Hashem is our God, is our strength, is our being, is our everything. Which means to say that there, and we will learn later on a little bit more in depth, that in fact there is a possibility for the Jew to be able to make the impossible happen. And what's that? To take infinity amount of godly light and place it in 100 mil vessel. We know we can't take a billion amount of liters and place it into a cup that only contains 100 mils. Yet we have the possibility and we have the ability, and this is the meditation that we must meditate, and the conclusion that we must come to when we recite the Shema. And that is that we have the potential to draw down the infinite God, meaning to say the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light of God, into this world, into the vessels, and cause it to be revealed. How this is possible to happen, we will discuss perhaps in another time, but just very, very briefly, because there's a part of the infinite God that exists within our vessel as well. And that is hidden. When we reveal that, then the vessel too can relate to infinite. Right now, what is revealed in this world? The concealment of godliness is revealed. In other words, what is the predominant ingredient? Concealment of godliness. And the limitation is that which is most revealed. But when we focus on the infinite nature of godliness, we focus on godliness and our inner nature and inner core, we turn that over. And when we look to overturn and overcome our finite limitations, our negative characteristic traits, and are willing to transcend ourselves and to value and to incorporate within ourselves good attributes, and go beyond what is our comfort zone, then we're able to overturn the vessel and cause the vessel to the hidden part of the vessel, our body, our being, our psyche, to be reversed. And that is to turn it inside out. And that is, now we'll discuss it hopefully more at length later on, and that is that everything in this world has the finite nature and the infinite nature. In other words, for there to be a physical world, only the infinite God could create its opposite, so to speak. And therefore, when we relate to that part of ourselves, when we reveal that aspect of ourselves, and when we diminish our limited, our material, our coarse and gross materialism of our existence, then we become vessels for the infinite God. First of all, that begins from meditation and understanding, and that is through the recitation of the Shema. So I will take questions at the end. If anybody has any questions, we'll take it hopefully at the end. We'll have some time at the end. So what we are effectively saying on page 202, the second line, is that there are two dimensions of God's name. One is Elokeinu, Elokim, our intimate God, meaning to say that part of godliness that intimately relates to me, is my strength, is my power. That is the light that's called Memale Kol Almin, that fills the world. As the Gemara in Masechet Brachot says, Kashem Sheha Neshama Memala Et Aguf, just as the soul fills the body, so to speak, and enlivens the body, intimately related with the body, Kach HaKadosh Baruch Hu Memale Et HaOlam, so too does God fill the earth, meaning to say that there is a type of godly revelation that is intimately related to the world, so to speak. Because don't forget, God is infinite. How can that happen? When He contracts His godly light and limits how much light will enter this world. So on the one hand, we and that light, the vessel and that light, is intimately related. Because that light is exactly catered for the vessel, for me. But yet it's limited. There is something that is beyond that. When we go beyond ourselves, beyond the limitations of my body, my desires, etc., and we train ourselves to go beyond that, then we too are able to draw down and reveal the infinite light, the Or Ein Sof, in the physical finite body. How is that possible? Because the finite body too has a part of the infinite God. We've just turned it over. It means to say that we've concealed what is revealed, and we've revealed what is concealed. What is revealed? Revealed is the infinite, the finite, I beg your pardon, the finite and limited nature of body. What is concealed? The infinite part, the infinite connection to the infinite God that brought it into being in the first place. For only the infinite God can bring about the finite being, that which is its exact opposite. I know it's a little bit complex, but let me just explain this a little bit further. Whilst we're on the topic, I might as well explain it now. From every high spiritual level, from every light, will come about, when it, so to speak, brings to birth another light, it will bring to birth something in comparison to it, not its exact opposite. In other words, even if the light is diminished, two human beings bring to birth a being, an entity, a human that's comparable to it. They don't all of a sudden give birth to a giant that is 10 meters tall and 10 meters wide, or a planet, or a star, or some sort of spiritual entity. Human beings give birth to human beings. So too, in the spiritual realms, a spiritual light can only give birth, so to speak, to another spiritual light, even though it's diminished. But it is very similar to that light. It's impossible from a spiritual light to give birth to a physical body or entity or a vessel. It's impossible. It can only come about through the divine will. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? In other words, from light can only come about another light. It is the divine will that will cause parts of the light to be diminished in such a way, and with many spiritual contractions, that will ultimately give birth to a vessel. That comes from the divine will. In other words, the source of this material physical world is the divine will. God wills it. And so it comes from a very, very, very high source. It can't come about through even very high, lofty light. But that's hidden. What do we see? We don't see that. We know that there is a divine will. We know that God wills that there be a body, and that body will be associated with the soul, and it will fulfill God's will in Torah mitzvot. And the function of Torah mitzvot is to be able to allow the body to be able to enter a higher level than it is currently exists. And then the whole world to enter a higher level that it currently exists. So again, which means that the body, even though it's limited and finite, has a part of it, its source, its very high spiritual source up above, in the very first beginnings of the desire of God to create a world, is its spiritual root. That God desires a physical material world, but that's hidden. All we know and all we see and all we relate to, the body relates to physical things, want to eat, want to sleep, want to drink, want to this, want to that, etc., etc., etc. The soul is spiritual, it's light, even though when it enters the body it has to be filtered somewhat to be able to enter the body, because if it's too powerful, then the body will totally be rendered as no longer a body. It'll just be totally nullified to the soul and will not have any free choice, will not exist in the same way that it exists now. Our objective is to be able to consciously choose to do the will of God, and by constantly choosing to do the will of God, we elevate the vessel, our body, and the whole world. And by doing so, we then cause that my body, our bodies, our vessels become a proper receptacle, a proper vessel for the infinite light, for the Or Ein Sof, for the infinite light. And this is what it means when you say Shema Yisrael, Hero Israel. We're not saying Yaakov, the lower name of the Jacob, as we discussed last week. Shema Yisrael, the higher level of Israel that we can all aspire to. The name Israel is Sar El, the minister of God. We are the Sar El, the minister of God, and also Li Rosh. It spells Li Rosh, you are to me a head, and we said before that the head is the essence, even in creation. The concept of the world comes about through a higher levels, which is called Rosh, which is called the head. For example, Chokhmah, everything is born from Chokhmah, from the divine wisdom. So, as far as God is concerned, Yisrael is Li Rosh. He's the beginning of it all. He's the essence of it all. He has the potential to be able to rise above the materialism, because he is rooted to the very core of the purpose of creation of the world. When we meditate upon this, when we meditate upon Hashem Elokeinu, the Yud K and Vav K is Elokeinu, is our power, is our strength, then we're able to begin to understand that we can also be a vessel of the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light, rather than just the light that emanates from the name Elokim, which is a more limited and finite relationship with Hashem. We will now continue, and towards the end I will try and take some questions. Again, Ki Hashem Elokeinu, the Elokeinu, the second line of page 202. The Elokeinu hu kohenu v'hayotenu hu havaya. The Elokeinu hainu, that Elokeinu, our God, which means kohenu v'hayotenu, our strength and our life, for our life force, our life energy, hu havaya comes from the Tetragrammaton name. Because truly we can relate to that name as well, even though it is beyond any limitations, but we can truly relate to it if we so desire and wish. Now, let's continue. Hinei Shem Elokim, for behold, the name Elokim, the name of our God, Ulashon Koach, expresses and connotes an expression of strength and power. Ukomo shekatuv, for example, ve'etel ha'aretz lakach, and he took the strong ones of the land. El, the name, the word El is power, the powerful ones. Now, Elokim has within it the letters of Aleph and Lamed, which is power and strength. Shemoreh ala koach v'chozek, that refers to power and strength. Ve'elokim, and therefore the name Elokim begimatria hateva has the same exact numerical value as hateva, which means nature. Which means that when we look at nature, when we take nature for granted, these laws of nature, how godliness is veiled in the veil of nature, that is really godliness. Shebechol davar vedavar, in every matter, hare tiv'o, its nature, hu koho, connotes its strength and power. In other words, the defining godly light that will animate it will be dependent upon its nature. If it's massive, if it's great, will define whether its godly light will be greater or smaller. If it's an ant or a leaf, then smaller. Ve'anu omrim, and I will expound this a little bit more next week. I'm going to take questions in a minute. Ve'anu omrim, and therefore we say, Havaya, Hashem, the Tetragrammaton, Elokenu, is our strength and is the very nature, which means to say that although there is a concept of nature, and nature connotes limitations, that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, no different. Therefore, the whole concept of the laws of nature connotes limitations, and that these limitations come from the name Elokim, which is the way godliness reveals itself in a manner of limitation. But now, even though that our energy is Elokenu, is koach, strength, and nature, which connotes limitations, however, Hashem Elokenu, the power of everything, is Havaya, the Or Ein Sof, which is beyond limitation, which means to say that we can, so to speak, extricate ourselves even from not only physical limitations, but spiritual limitations, to be able to reach a level that is beyond even spiritual limitations. In other words, to relate to godliness in a new way, in a new fashion, in a fashion that transcends all limitations, even godly limitations, i.e. the name Elokim. We can truly relate not only to the name Elokim that enlivens and is associated with nature, etc., but we can relate to the name Havaya, which is the Or Ein Sof. We have the ability to do so even in our finite being, even whilst we have a finite, limited body. Okay, I'm going to stop right here and I'm going to take some questions.